Welcome to the latest episode of Authenticated with your host, Kate McLeod. I am intrigued by people. People watching, I love. People learning, that's where I'm insatiably curious. I'm interested in the why and how of the creative mind's pattern of thinking, the subtext to the creative thinker, or in its more conscious and malleable form, the creative conscious. Because when you are so clear on yourself via the triad of consciousnesses, then you become reflective to others. Meeting yourself is an infectious practice because what feels good is infectious and something I think we could all use a good dose of. So join me in conversations with a diverse arsenal of creative thinkers, from artists to entrepreneurs to serial thinkers ready to optimize their creative conscious. With me, self-made and self-proclaimed creative entrepreneur. Sounds hot, right? Welcome to the podcast. This is Regina Strayhorn. She is a writer, she is a casting professional, and she is a musician. You were just on tour with John Gallagher Jr. with Bandits on the Run.
Yeah.
How was that?
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It's great. Like, Johnny is an amazing performer and just person. So it was really great to like experience different parts of the country together. It was like such a joy to get to see him over and over and over again, night after night. And also for him to see us over and over again. And then we kind of talk about like, oh, this was different, or like how this song hits on this night versus this night or whatever. And yeah, so it was great.
How did that transform over the course of time being out of the place that you're used to performing primarily and creating?
How did it transform? I mean, I think that the shows deepen, but they also are so unique in terms of like they exist in that particular city in that particular time, and they never happen again. So I think there's kind of this like impermanence thing that goes on, which is kind of funny because it's like we're playing, similar sets. Like not every set is the same, but like we'll tend to play like a lot of the things that we've just released or, things that are new. So we'll be relatively consistent about the songs that we play, but it's different every show. Like the audience has a huge, huge hand in how it feels. And the venue too. Like it all changes. So
how is that for your presence as a musician?
I think that it can be challenging because when you're touring, you're tired a lot of the time. It's a lot of logistics. So many logistics. It can get exhausting, but it also can be. It can make you really present in a way too.
Yeah.
Just, and like I said before, it's super fleeting. So you really have to enjoy it while it's happening. And it's kind of a nice life lesson in that way. I think that's part of what I like about music in general, is that there is this sort of almost mantra-ness about it, where you're like, you're doing a repetition, but every time it's different, and you're bumping up against, edges you didn't know you had, and you're like, oh, okay, that's an edge. Or you think you're about to bump up against something, and you go, oh, actually, I can go farther than I kind of thought. And all of that is within the context of this handful of songs, or the group you're in, and the instruments you have, and the resources you have.
Performative artistry always interests me in that way, where there is a pattern. You know the song. You guys wrote the song. The parts of you, the version of you that existed when you wrote the song is there. And then you're presenting it within that framework to a group where you are super, super present, and also finding out more about yourself too. But because this is only one kind of art you do, does it feel like it satiates a certain part of you, or is it still the whole person that this part of your artistry serves?
I don't know if it's cheating to say both.
Yeah, not cheating.
Because on the one hand, I think it's something that I particularly love. Like I love the experience of being on stage and playing a song that we wrote within the context of me, my bandmates, Adrian and Sydney, like sharing our trio dynamic with a broader audience. Like that to me just like is a certain delight in my life that's kind of above a lot of other delights, where I love it. I never get tired of it. So in that way it's really singular, and that I super enjoy it. And it's also a part of a bigger storytelling practice that I have too. Like it's not separate from, the other ways that I like to think and to bring kind of vulnerable stories into the world. And as I get older, I kind of am constantly thinking about how to bring all of my sort of ways that I'm activated together, So yes and no.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's evolution, right?
Yeah.
Because I think what's wonderful about the industry these days, even though it's so scary at the moment, is I think that we have a lot more resources to create what it is that we want to do, and also create the kind of artistry that exists literally for us. You know, whenever someone asks me, like, what are the steps to get to this place artistically, I always say it's whatever you think the steps are.
Yeah.
It's so nice to hear that it's not one thing, it's not one side, it's the entire person, you know, and the storytelling comes from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it ever sort of feel like you're carrying older versions of yourself, or versions that you've sort of not left, but versions you've been? Does it feel like they're all, like, all the versions of you are there together?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think you're like making stuff for those people, like those like younger versions of yourself. And I love what you're saying about embracing sort of multitudes, and that you're like this whole person making art. Because I think that that's a huge thing that I think there's more of a collective awakening
Yes.
to the reality that that's really kind of how we operate.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, trying to think of yourself as like one person who does one thing and one thing only, to the detriment of, like, if you try to do something else, then you're harming your one thing. To me, that feels very like steeped in capitalism, steeped in like this sort of idea of like branding. And if you step outside of the mall, the online mall we have for ourselves, if you do something that makes people go, I don't quite understand that they won't want you anymore. But instead, it's like, I think that, you know, moving towards an authentic version of what you're interested in can be scary, because you can be interested in a lot of things. And I think that our culture and the industry doesn't right now support that dynamicism, you know?
Yeah, I don't think so either. And it's because the foundation's old.
Yes, exactly.
And it's something that also us as artists like us, and now that we are pushing away and just saying, yeah, we don't really want that model anymore. What has been working is no longer working. So it's moot, away with you. And also, like, we are a society that lacks authenticity. And so for us to show up, and I don't like it when people say, well, who are you as the person? Who are you as the artist? The artist is the person.
Yes.
Because I want to share myself, because it's an act of vulnerability. It's an act of saying, hey, let me lead by example and let you follow.
Yeah.
And I also am not interested in anything that is definitively what it is. Like, I look at it and I'm like, I understand immediately. I'm bored.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So it's like, let me just sit with that. And, you know, as I've listened to your music, I hear different things. I see different images. My body reacts physically different. Like this morning, I had like a tingling sensation, and I had a visual of movement. It wasn't a visual like a picture that I had in other times that I've heard it, where I was like, oh, I see a field right now, and I am in it. You know, this morning I was like, oh, that. But it still was image based, and it just changes, and we need to change, because that's what being human and being authentic is, constantly changing. I don't want to feel the same way I felt 2 weeks ago.
100%.
In this way. I mean, there are fundamentals that we keep at our core, but absolutely not in any other way.
Yeah, 100%. And there are times where I feel so down for change, and so like sort of integrated with the wildness of life, where I'm like, yeah, let's have seasons, baby, let's rock and roll. And there are other times where it feels really hard, because it's a constant like letting go process of, oh, I thought that I understood something, but the ground is shifting beneath my feet, and I'm tired. And, you know, like, I think that is something that's super tiring for people. It's tiring for me, you know, and we have to find ways of like regenerating that energy so that we can, you know, show up for the ride that it is.
Yeah. And I think the rejuvenation part that you just touched on, that's the important part, where it's like, for example, you get better sleep if you exhaust yourself. And so it's like, if you keep creating, you are going to shed a lot, and you're going to rejuvenate, and you're going to renew. But that's how you bring yourself again to the artistry. And that's what's so exciting about it. But when you allow yourself to shed and rejuvenate, even though it's very uncomfortable, like in my biggest growth stages as an artist, when people check in and say, how are you feeling? I think, I'm just feeling generally uncomfortable. And it's not a bad thing.
Totally.
But just, there's a lot of shedding, because there's evolution. Evolution always comes hand in hand with mourning, because you have to let those things go. And it's hard, because it's like, you think you know, and then you learn something else, and then what you know kind of has to change, and you have to let it go and move on.
Yeah.
And you've expanded so much as an artist.
Yeah. It's a lot of privilege and a lot of grief. It's a lot of like, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that because I feel like my entire kind of like adult career, I've been in New York making art for 10 years now,
Mm-hmm.
which
Wow.
is insane for me.
Happy
to even think about.
anniversary.
It's my anniversary. And my career has gone in directions where I completely could not have predicted when I first came here. My background is I went to school for acting at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, moved to New York, and thought that I would be doing theater and auditioning and just kind of generally seeing what was up. And I got to New York and that wasn't feeling good for me. I wasn't feeling excited to hustle. And that makes all the sense in the world because looking back, I'm like, yeah. And even now, it's like I'm never really excited to grind in a system that is designed to keep me tired. But what I do enjoy is like having a quiet space where I can be in touch with what interests me and then like slowly getting there and being in community and letting that resource me, instead of kind of doing it like alone.
Mm-hmm.
But to sort of take a step back for a second, everything that I've done, being in a band, working in casting, now kind of writing more for musical theater, this sort of swirling pot of music and the vulnerability that acting taught me how to do. And then the curatorial sense that comes from wanting to say, what do we want to put out there? All of that requires a lot of capacity to be uncomfortable.
Yes, it does.
To be in dialogue with what's working for me, what's not working for me, what opportunities are coming to me. And I think I've worked really hard to increase that capacity. And sometimes I feel like that is like a huge part of the work is being like, how do I make space for this sort of like unknown expansion when I'm like,
yeah. Yeah.
enough.
Well, by way of creating your own system.
Yeah.
Because I love what you said. Yeah. It inherently is meant to, the system of acting, especially in New York, is meant to keep you tired. It is meant to make you say no and give up. When really, I think a lot of artistry and following your own authenticity has to do with saying no to certain things so you can say yes to others.
Yes.
And it's about community. It by way of being a system that doesn't work and that is unforgiving and relentless, it forces you to find community. It forces you to find opportunities to diversify. And that is why we're becoming multi-hyphenates and no one's just one thing anymore. We're just creatives.
Yeah.
But the world is so obsessed with boxification.
Yeah.
Well, how do I understand you? I'm sorry. Is it important for you to understand me?
Yeah.
You don't need to get the whole picture. Just get a good reaction or any kind of reaction out of one little element.
Yeah. It's like this when people are boxed in, it's very easy to present something and to understand something quickly. And it feels like the purpose is to understand it quickly. And it's like, oh, that's not really what I'm interested in. I think that's like all the systems of oppression, they work with creating hierarchies quickly.
No one's got patience anymore, apparently.
And it's like, I want to completely divest from that system of thinking. I do feel like I look around to everyone that's making things, like everyone in our circle, and everyone is going like, golly, I need to slow down. Or like the work that I'm putting out, it doesn't feel like it represents me in my totality. And that bothers me. And I don't know the answer to that. I think that whether you're a musician and you want to write songs, or you're an actor and you want to serve a piece, or you want to be a filmmaker and create a short or whatever, I think that there is a joy in working in specific mediums. But I think that there's this underlying frustration where people go like, I want to, at my core, I have a artistic channel and sometimes I want to be in many spaces and it feels like I'm not supported in that flexibility.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I'm interested in, like through all the things that I try to do. And also through my own understanding of myself is trying to get to like, okay, like how can we support that movement?
Yeah.
Maybe you can't do everything at the same time, but you can do everything at different times. So what does it look like to make the space to explore here or there?
Yeah. I think that's the crux of it, is what does it look like, because I think the mitochondria of the artistry that you're talking about, that you're interested, is just being honest,
Yeah.
and it's like, we never know what we're talking about. Like I had a day plan today. You had a day plan today. I'm sure it's going to look different at the end of the night than
Yes.
we anticipated this morning. And that is okay. You have to allow room for that growth, for the lack of anticipation in that, and to just let it be what it's going to be, so long as you're leading with honesty.
The ability to get to a place where you can be honest, where you can be authentic with yourself, where you can like choose things that interest you genuinely, especially if you are young and you're in school and they're teaching you, this is how you achieve your dreams. This is the way. If I could go back and I could give myself like one piece of advice for college, it would be that like, I am there to see what works for me, and like anything that doesn't work for me, I don't need. It's so important to like have a healthy wariness of authority.
Yes.
And you have to be humble enough to be able to receive someone's teachings. But if you are humble enough and you've listened and you've tried it out and it does nothing for you, bye.
Exactly. I don't know why it took so long, because I think about that version of myself back in school. One, I want to hug her.
Yes.
I know, like, babe, listen,
It's trying so hard.
But, it's not so formulaic, and it's not to think that it is formulaic. It's not to take something that anyone says as fact. What it is to listen actively and critically as yourself through that person's lens. Stand in their shoes for a little bit, listen to what they have to say.
Yeah.
Listen to everything, take what you need, like you said, and leave the rest. And maybe something will hit you again, because that happens to me sometimes now, where someone said in undergrad, and I'm like, oh, that's what that meant. There was this thing that was always said to me in undergrad and graduate school. There was always at least a handful of professors who said it, and I never understood what they meant by it. But they would always say, you're too smart to be an actor. And I hated that. I hated it, because one, doesn't make sense. Two, what a horrible thing to say to a young aspiring artist, But what I took from that was, I am not the person to be one thing. And I don't think they realized what message they were giving me. But what I did take from it was, it's got to be bigger than.
Yeah.
It's got to be more than. And it was the worst way to possibly say it. But, it's just to fill out and to offer and to accept that we are all big beings. We are big energetic givers, and we live on a vibrational frequency. And I think that our artistry is vibration. It's giving out, it's taking, it's absorbing. It's just like, it's its own organism.
Yeah. Art that feels really good is like, I feel like when I am seeing somebody, like if I'm seeing a show and I'm loving it, there is this sort of thing of, you could read it many ways. You could say like, your vibration is matching my vibration. And so we're just like, it feels good to just be humming and be like, yes. Or you can say like, I'm picking up what you're putting down, or being like, whatever poetry you just expressed, I feel like you have named something that I experienced. Like all these are words for the same thing. And I love exactly what you said. We're like a channel for energy.
Yeah.
And that's where, I think that it's possible to be an artist and not be spiritual, but I think that, like all people who make a piece of art that is emotional and has themselves in it, has experienced what it feels like to sort of have something come through you and move through you, and how good that can feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A channel, or like a conduit of sorts.
Totally.
Yeah. You said you were earlier that you're working on musical theater.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So me, my bandmates, Sydney Torn-Shepard and Adrian Blagensko, the three of us were Bandits on the Run. And then also our friend Christopher Sears. The four of us are all composing a new musical it's a musical adaptation of What's Eating Gilbert Grape, the novel by Peter Hedges, my dear friend Peter Hedges. And it was also a movie in the early 90s with Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
And we're making it a musical now. That process, has just been utterly delightful. I really, it's kind of funny that I didn't see it happening before because, me, Sydney, and Adrian and Chris, we all have acting backgrounds. We all work in the theater. We all, work in this sort of space where acting and music is swirling around each other.
Yeah.
And so in recent years, that has really coalesced in working on this musical, and we're also working on a new musical project that's like, just baby, it's just starting.
Oh.
And so it's, it's one of those things where it's like, kind of like I said before I moved to New York and I've been doing stuff that I didn't expect to do. I didn't expect to be a musical theater composer person, but when I can zoom out, I go, oh my God, it makes all the sense in the world. And I love it. And it feels like the intersection of a lot of like things that I feel like I know how to do, and that feels like, it's just like, yes.
Yes.
Here we go. Let's rock and roll.
Well, I'm curious because you said I didn't see it. So I just have a hunch here I want to follow. Like, is that part of your superpower that you can attract the things that, if you're really grounded in the things that you love and knowing yourself, can you attract the things that are right for you?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that feels right to say, but I also feel a little self-conscious because
Of course.
it's like, oh, I think I feel a little bit shy about that, but I think that's me trying to minimize my sort of manifestation abilities and like this sort of like being smaller thing that a lot of especially women artists are taught to do. Like, I do think it's a superpower that I have. I think I have a lot of faith in the power of knowing what you want and surrounding yourself with people who are good for you.
Yes.
I think that's so critical for people who like really believe in you and who support you, because I don't really think that you can make good art alone for a long time. I think it's possible to make good art by yourself, but for the long term, for the sustainability of like, keeping growing and the joy of discovering like, well, if I keep working at this, what's going to happen? I do think you have to surround yourself with people who get you and who are down for that exchange.
Well, there's so much vulnerability in finding your tribe too.
Oh my God.
And in outsourcing. It's very scary to me when I've had to outsource things or be like, all right, so I'm going to trust you with this part of myself, or we're going to do this together. I'm about to enter into a writing relationship with someone for a new script, and I've never co-written scripts. I've always written them by myself. And so that's scary too, but it's also exciting because there is a weight to artistry and it doesn't have to be carried alone.
Yes.
And there is something so beautiful where it's like you do actually need other people always. Yeah. But I want to go back to your superpowers because I know you have many. And again, if you don't want to answer anything, please just let me know that you're saving it for the Tony speech. It's absolutely fine. But this is only the third time that you and I are hanging out, which is crazy.
Which is crazy.
I
just have so much fun with you.
I have so much fun.
We just connect.
Yes. The first time I met you, I was like, whoa, I love, like, the energy you have is just, it's warm and it's all embodying. It's really, really wonderful. And I've asked you this before, but I'm curious what your answer is today. How do you preserve that energy for yourself? Because the world is the world that we live in, and you have such a beautiful nature about you. So what are your secrets to that superpower?
Thanks, Kate. First of all, that's just a really lovely thing to say.
I mean it.
And I feel the same way too.
Thank you.
I have a couple things. I love therapy. I have an amazing therapist.
Same.
And I think my specific therapist has been really helpful to me, but also I think just like having dedicated time to think about like your inner life, whether it's with a therapist or if it's, whatever your version of that is.
Yes.
I think that's been really critical to me. Having my friends, specifically Sydney and Adrian, we make so much stuff together and we support each other so much. I think that's a huge part of like, my energy, because I think you need people in your life to go like, I think you need to sit down or say like, hey, stop belittling this, go farther, or whatever it is that you need reflected for you. I think like having people who are truly there for you, that's a huge part of my energy. It's the basic stuff. I try to sleep. I try to drink a bunch of water. I try to move more. And all these things are things that there are sometimes where I feel like I'm really strong at them and sometimes it's harder for me to remember just the basic stuff of like, if you're being drained, you have to replenish. And that's just like, you know, everything is a series of like damage and repair, and you don't have to like catastrophize. Like, it's like, oh my God, you need to sleep. You just need to sleep.
Just for now.
Just for now.
Yeah.
It's amazing what it'll do. Throw your life in the trash and like move back home and like, just like do something else. It's like you just need to repair.
Yeah.
You're damaged to repair.
Yeah. Just like batteries, plug back in for a second and then
Yes.
keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard, especially with people who operate at high frequencies and have a lot of energy. It is really hard because I think oftentimes we can be perceived as superhuman and therefore treated as such.
Yeah.
And that's just not the vibe, because like I feel like I absorb so much of other people where it's like, I don't need to believe that about myself. Please don't let me believe that about myself. Like, I know that I need to sleep. I know that I need to drink water, even though like, I don't know why those are such like fundamental human things that are so hard to believe.
I mean, dude, I think that's where you get into the human experience of it all, where it's like, sometimes it's just tough to take care of yourself because it's like life is brutal. It's brutal. And it feels like, especially nowadays, like it feels like we're always on the edge of some catastrophe. And there are catastrophes happening. There are wars, there are genocides, there are people, who can't afford basic, like, I don't know, our basic needs oftentimes are not being met. And so it makes all the sense in the world that it feels like a struggle, because it is, and in that the question becomes like, how do you choose freedom? How do you choose resources? How do you like figure out what it means for you to believe that you're worth it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when it's hard.
It's a constant practice.
Yeah.
It really is. And sometimes it's just a decision to decide that that's how you're going to live.
Yeah.
Which is also really hard, because words are powerful, but sometimes when they're your own, it's really hard to let yourself believe that they are powerful for yourself, because we have a million things going on in our brains constantly. But then when one thing is said to us, sometimes we can like focus on that. Things can affect us more than we can actually just give them out, which is so interesting. And it's a habit to break.
Yeah.
When you're casting and you're perceiving all these different people at all times, what is that like?
Oh, it's a joy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love casting because I love human variance, and it's interesting. Like, I think when I started getting into casting, I started working at the Telsey office, which is a big office, and I absolutely adore the entire office there. And the projects that are at the office are incredible. It's like very high level projects. I've gotten to work on 2 TV series and a couple of different pilots, mostly working in the TV space. And it's interesting because I think when I was an actor, I had this perception that the casting department sort of was all powerful and really much more binary than is actually the truth. Like, when you don't see how the entire ecosystem operates, it can be easy to feel like somebody just said yes or no to me, and it's because they're good enough or not good enough. And then one of the joys of casting is you kind of see what it takes to make a huge project, and so many elements. And every actor who auditions, honestly, is fabulous. There are a lot of talented people in the world, and there are a lot of talented people in New York. Something I love about being on the other side is I get to revel in that. I can understand that it's really stressful to be on the other side and trying to be one individual, and you want to work, and you feel like, God, why are all these people so talented? What's going on? And so with the work I do, I try to do everything that I can to express gratitude, even in a small way. Like, I'll be watching self-tapes, and after I watch every tape, I try to go, thank you. Like, and just just energetically to like, just
Send
sort
it
of
out.
hope that because there's, in my dream world, I would get to like email every single person, be like, thank you so much. Like, you're
Yes.
on your tape. But, that's just not possible with the way things are set up.
No.
But yeah. I mean, casting to me, like, if music is the great joy of expressing sort of my individuality and the individuality of the dynamic I have with Sydney and Adrian, and sort of like, presenting, these are the things that we're thinking about and feeling, and we're presenting them to an audience. with casting, I love being able to support what other people are bringing to the table. And it excites my curator brain,
Yeah.
because really what you're
Ooh.
doing is you're looking at many people's takes on a character and going, several of these could work. Several of these could work. But what's the chemistry between the people we already have and what we think it could be? And I'm always keeping in mind, like, who's underrepresented? Like, how can we be pushing for these people to be seen more? Because, these TV shows have a global impact. And, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's because it's unless you have the privilege of being able to do it, it's hard to convey how giddy of an experience it can be to be like, look at all these beautiful actors,
Yeah.
and how many ways this TV show could go. And also the reality is just like, if it was somebody else in a different time, maybe it would go another way. But with the team we have and the time we have, let's pick an option.
Well, you say that and I get the visual in my head, and this is new to me in the moment, but I see like a bag of all absolutely beautiful beads, but randomized. And
Yes.
you get 20 beads to make a bracelet. I can make thousands of beautiful bracelets out of this bag, but I happen to make this one.
That's a really great analogy, honestly. Like, it totally. And then the other beads that you don't choose, you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to make a necklace with you later.
Yes, exactly. No. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to remember you because like I have my eye on you and like you're going to fit where you're going to fit.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What has it taught you about yourself, casting?
Oh man, it's taught me that I love being an advocate for other people. It brings me so much joy to serve, honestly, especially my role in the productions that I've been a part of is I've been a casting assistant. So I am in charge of keeping detailed records of who we see, when we see them. You're just very like, you're following everything that happens. You're following all the moves. For some people, that might sound overwhelming to be like, God, you have to chart everything that happens. And is that a lot of moving parts? It is a lot of moving parts. And you also see in real time how something gets made. And it's just like, this is phenomenal. And I've always been a curious person.
Same.
I've always been the sort of person who wanted to know how the sausage was made, where I'm just
Yes.
I'm like, it's great that it's here, but how did it get here?
Mm-hmm.
And if I like something, I want to be able to do it myself.
Yeah.
I think that's just sort of a tactile, like, let's get in there. I want to experience doing it too. It's taught me that I really care about the health of a system in ways that I was experiencing before in a smaller way with my band, where I care deeply about the health of our system and what we're doing. And then working on TV shows, they're just huge projects. And even within the smaller team of like the casting team, I really care that I'm anticipating people's needs and that I'm being kind even when we're in a rush, and taking every opportunity to say thank you. I learned that it matters to me to have my stamp on the world. I learned that I deserve to be a part of all of it.
Yes.
And that my voice is important and influential in creating new systems. And that's something that I am just really interested in moving forward, where it's like, that's kind of like a guiding light, whether it's music or writing for musical theater or writing for a TV show or casting a TV show or whatever may come next that I don't even know yet. I think it's like, if you can create a new ecosystem that feels good, where it feels like people can do really good work, there's just so much joy in the labor of that to be like, I can't fix everything. I can't go back and change negative experiences I've had where I felt like, disrespected. I can't go back and do that. But what I can do is sort of, be this Pokemon that's evolving. And so then whenever I do something, try and make that a process that people want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And I can, and so I think with casting, I've been able to be a part of projects that I'm super proud to have worked on, and the sort of status of those things, the high profile nature of them, made me realize that, like, kind of everything is honestly much more similar than capitalism would like you to believe. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you can be working on a really fancy project, but it's like the emails are being sent. People are having to do the same kind of grunt work
Mm-hmm.
on this like bigger level. It's the same stuff, but but just heightened. But really,
Yeah.
at the core of it, it's the same thing.
The foundation's always the
The
same.
foundations, and so therefore, it also makes me feel like a little bit less. I believe a little bit less in hierarchies. Honestly, I feel like a little bit like, it's beautiful to be a part of like things that are fancy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's super cool, and also, work is work, and
Yeah.
and it's more important to have that internal power than to think that it comes from whatever you're participating in.
As you're speaking about this, I kept thinking what a gift confidence is. But it's not actually confidence, because that word didn't feel like it sat right with me. It's internal power.
Yeah.
It's probably what powers authenticity. You can't wait for other people to give permission. You have to give yourself permission.
Yeah.
I noticed a huge shift in my career and my overall happiness as an artist and a person when I decided that I was the answer, and I was no longer going to look at other people as my answer.
Yes.
It's about taking control. And also, yes, everything is hard until you understand it. Like Latin is hard until you speak Latin.
Yes. Yeah. And that's just a basic truth. 100%.
It's such a journey, but it is so empowering to know that you do one thing that feels true to you. And that will apply to everything else that you do. Even if it's already an operating system, you can apply that because you have the knowledge. It's like, yeah, I haven't done this, but I did the fundamentals of it. It's switching the narrative to choosing that you're qualified as opposed to trying to prove that you're qualified.
Yes.
You're qualified because you're an artist.
Yeah.
And because you've made these other things work in your life.
Yeah. And you have a point of view.
Yes.
And that's enough.
Yeah, that is enough.
There's not some like line that you're going to cross where all of a sudden you go, oh, well, someone told me that I'm like good enough, and so now I am good enough. That someone truly is you.
Yeah.
And that's hard because you're the only person who can really give yourself that freedom.
Yeah.
There's a lot of frustration in that too, where you're like, I want to be free. Why can't I let myself? It's an internal struggle. So it's like, it's hard to get to that point. And it's also a moment that you kind of recommit to over and over again. I feel like I don't even remember. I think it was a slow evolution. I can't pinpoint a certain moment in time where I felt like, okay, I really have autonomy over my own self, and I'm valuable, and people want to hear what I want to play, and people respond to my voice and what I want to put out there. I don't remember that. But I do remember moments where, you're challenged, and then you just recommit to it, and you recommit to it, and you recommit to it. And then it becomes a practice. And it's funny to talk about because I think it's such a physical thing. I don't know if you feel the same way, but like that sort of that decision that you make within yourself to be like, I'm going to rock and roll. And actually, people will follow if they want to. If they're smart, they'll get on board and they'll see what I'm doing. But if they don't, then that has nothing to do with me.
Exactly.
It's such a physical sensation.
The kindest thing that you can do for yourself as an artist is to manifest in a way that you believe, where, like, for my first guest on the podcast, that morning I woke up and I started catastrophizing in my head. And I was like, what if I don't know what to ask them? What if I just like forget words? What if this goes so bad? And then another voice in my head was like, okay, girl, stop. Because what if it all goes really, really well? Yeah. And also just deciding that things are going to happen is what's going to lead you to that next step in your life. You have to decide, not just like, well, I hope I make it to this point that I want to make. It's like, no, I'm going to make it to that point that I want to make. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
I wish that confidence or that energy, that internal energy, that driving force was in pill form, because I just want to give it to so many people.
God, same.
Yeah.
Same.
Just like, you matter, and what you want to happen is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. And there is so much space, and there are so many people. There's so much space for these things.
Yeah.
And not that it's easy now. it's not like easier now, but there are so many more accessible ways. We have so many different platforms that we can share ourselves on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the change is, but a change needs to happen where part of the training of artistry comes to just believing this.
Yes.
Just believing that you are worthy and that these things that you want to happen, you can make happen. You have the ability to make happen.
Yeah. I mean, if only the first year at every like college program was, okay, how to breathe and suffer. And then still put something in. You know what I mean? And to be like, don't worry about being good for the first year, honestly. Don't worry about it.
No.
You're not going to be.
No.
Frankly.
And also, how you are perceived is none of your business.
It's like just, and the thing is, I don't know about everybody else, but for me, what I like people who are messy. I like watching people make mistakes. I like things that aren't perfect. You know, perfect doesn't actually exist, but like, I like it when I see people being like, oh, you know, I'm catastrophizing today, but I did it anyway. It's so winning. You know what I mean? It's so winning. And it feels bad when you're the person who is messy. It just does. You know, how many times I've had so many moments where things have gone wrong on stage. Like I'll do a bum note or I'll forget some lyrics and then I'll be like, oh no. And then it'll mess up the rest of my performance, you know, and then I'll feel like, oh, that wasn't so good or whatever. And then afterwards, people will love the show.
Yeah.
And people will relate to the striving, you know, because that's really what we're doing here. At the end of the day, I don't really think it matters like through what medium you're expressing yourself and your impulse and your vibration. Like everything is a striving towards connecting.
I love that.
So it's like if you mess up, but you're still striving, you're still doing the thing. You're still doing the thing.
Yeah.
You had the worst audition ever known to man. You're the worst actor anyone's ever seen. You tried, man.
You did.
Well, you were going boldly, like, and we'll remember you.
Yeah. And
come back.
yeah, please. And also everything that you need to keep going forward is within you or within reaching distance of yourself.
Yes. It's not mysterious.
No.
And people want to create like this like foggy gate around what it's like, and it keeps everyone out. So it keeps people of color out. It keeps like the people from lower incomes out. It keeps queer people out. It keeps, you know, everyone who's marginalized in society farther away and being like, you have a higher goalpost to jump. To say that like that there is some level of professionalism that you don't have access to right now. And it's like, I'm struggling to find words for it because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, but like, I certainly have the things that I think are good and the things that kind of take me away and make me kind of forget who I am for a second. And I enjoy the craft that comes behind that. But whatever you put out, somebody's going to like. And so this sort of sheen of, am I good enough? It's like, what spectrum are you really talking about? I don't believe in that spectrum. I don't believe in this sort of, here's the line where your art becomes worthy enough.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't believe it. If you have an audience and even if your audience is like your best friend who thinks you rock, like that's a great starting.
Yeah. No, it is. Also just trusting your own voice.
Yeah.
Too. It's going to elicit a reaction with someone. It's going to resonate with someone.
Yeah.
And if you are compelled to create, to offer, to lead by example, I believe that if that is what you are compelled to do, it's for a reason and it's going to hit the right person at the right time. Maybe you won't see tangible physical results of that, but you have to trust that that is just how it works. There are too many people. Math works a certain way. Okay, statistically, it's gonna work out, okay? Do you have like a specific moment in time that you remember transition into this, or have you always kind of known? And by this, I mean this mindset.
I actually do have a moment. So I think that there were a couple of moments before this one, but this one I remember so viscerally. Bandits on the Run, we had won a songwriting contest to go to London. Long story short, like, we wrote a song about, like, the prompt was to write a very New York song. And we wrote a song about how Sidney and Adrian met. And it's called Love in the Underground. And we won this contest to go and do it at the Coffee Music Project in London. And so it was amazing. We, you know, there was like a Publishers Clearinghouse check that came out, and it was so big. And I used to watch shows like that when I was
Oh
younger.
my
I was like,
God, yeah.
and so we went over to Europe and we did this DIY tour over there. We were like, okay, well, we're being flown over there. Now that we're over there, we should put together some dates. And it was all a mix of busking on the street and playing at some friends' houses and playing at venues we found online, and we cold emailed them to be like, hey, we're this band from America. Can we play here? And it's so scrappy. And we went, and it was phenomenal, and it was super mind expanding because, I grew up thinking that I would never travel abroad, and that there was this sort of thing for me that was wrong. I can very much say now it was wrong, but like a younger version of myself,
Like an inaccessibility?
that it was inaccessible to me, and that it was for other people. It was for other people who had more money or were more famous or whatever. And I got back from that tour, and it was unbelievable. It was so fun. We were in England, and we went to Germany, and we were in France. And I'm like such a Francophile. I was just
blowing your own mind like every single day.
Yes. And it was just one of those moments where it was like, I was really convinced in my own the story of my smallness, but the universe was like, no, here you go. Like we're proving to you in real time, like that things beyond your imagination are possible. And how about you dream a little bit bigger, bro?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I like came back to work at the Starbucks in Brooklyn, and I like put on my apron, and it was like making a latte, and I just went, oh my God, I gotta quit this job. And I went, I literally, it was a moment where I went, my mind just got so much bigger, and not to, like I worked at Starbucks for a long time. It helped me get to where I needed to go, but I was staying there past the point where I needed to stay. When you're in a job that's not good for you. And
also because it's comfortable, and we have a tendency to stay too long.
Yeah, exactly. I was afraid of what was different. But I remember I quit that day. I didn't expect to quit when I came in for the shift, but it was the first 5 minutes, and I was like, I think that I have moved past this. And I think I've always been guided. I know that something's right when it feels like that classic, like an egg is like cracking on top of your head, and you just feel it tingling down your spine. I feel that way when I know something for sure. And it was I just had that moment where I was like, oh, Regina, you need to quit today.
Could you ever use that as a tool to rewire your brain that the expansiveness is safe? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. I think yes.
Yeah.
And I think that is psychologically really difficult because
yes,
your defenses pop up. You go, oh, no, I couldn't possibly. But 100%. I think that sometimes like you have moments where you just realize like there is a lot that's possible.
Yeah.
And, of course you're wounded by whatever has wounded you in your life. Of course you are. So much is possible. So if some of your wounds include smallness, fear, that's going to be a struggle, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. That's a much easier thing to say than to feel. And it's something I'm always going back to. I think something that I personally struggle with is I feel like, unsafe. Like, it's like, oh, is it safe to keep on expanding? It's like, oh my God, I'm a musician and I'm writing for this stuff and I'm casting stuff. I'm also interested in photography, which is part of how we connected.
Yes.
And there's a part of me that's like, oh my God, am I allowed to go into another venture in which I'm not, in which I feel new and that's vulnerable and I'm learning? Like, can I do that? And the answer is yes, but it just takes a lot of fortitude to be able to work through the muck that just comes up.
And your own definition of fortitude too, and like what that really means to you. I think we forget as a society because we are so answer hungry.
Yes.
We forget about the malleability of words.
Yeah.
And we forget what things can mean to us, and they can mean different things to us. And also that there is a willingness to being seen, but there is also a choice to being seen. I am choosing to be seen, but I'm also willing to be seen.
Yeah.
And you have to choose that every single day. I don't care how comfortable you are. I don't care how famous you are, what kind of tours you've been on. You still actively have to make that choice every single day. I would consider myself a insatiably curious person, and I love knowledge, and I love reading, and I love learning new things. But still, even though I know I love those things, and I have time and time again proved to myself how exciting those things can be, still whenever I go out on a new venture, I'm like, uh-oh, what if?
Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that's just because we're human, and that's what we've evolved from is stay safe, stay with the group, stay unseen. But now we're in a world where we've evolved so much that creative humans require so much space.
Yeah.
And so you should expand into whatever hunch it is that comes up.
Yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And trust that you're capable of building whatever support system you need.
Yep. You are capable of giving yourself what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being seen today here.
Oh my God. Thank you for seeing
Oh
me.
my-
I really appreciate it.
God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful conversation. I love your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, this means the world to me, and thank you so much. We are going to link everything in the show notes. This is Regina Strayhorn. Thank you so much for joining us. And that's the latest. I'm honored to have been part of your thinking sphere today. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe on this platform, or follow and participate on any of my social media platforms. If this practice intrigues you as much as it does me, then join us in the Me3 community, where we will work directly and you will curate a mindful method of thinking to define your own creative conscious. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Authenticated. I love that you're here.